Today's episode of Voiced is from r/Amethy Asshole and is about three intriguing dilemmas involving language secrets, name changes, and a controversial dinner bill. Which user had the most surprising twist to their story? Subscribe if you enjoy.
My husband, Peter, 29 years old male, and I, 27 years old female, have been married for about 3 years. We have one child together, and I was pregnant with our second. I'm Western Canadian, while he is from Germany. We lived in Canada for a long time, but because of inflation, moving back to Germany seemed like a better option for us. We bought a nice house in Hanover, where Peter is from. The day after our flights to Germany, we all visited Peter's family. This was the second time I have seen them. The first was at our wedding. They greeted us and brought us inside of the house, fussing over my son. We had dinner, and soon we left the house, wanting to settle into our new home. We visited Peter's family often for the next few months, but I had started to realize that they would sometimes speak about me in German. They would make rude comments about my hair and makeup, question my fashion choices, and overall were just very unkind to me. They also said mean things about my pregnant belly, which I was already insecure about. I ended up talking to my husband about this. I told him that I didn't like the way that they were treating me. I said that I hated how my every choice was judged. He told me that he would talk to his family. The next time that we went to his parents' house, there were no more mean comments. For about 3 months, it was like nothing ever happened. I gave birth to a perfect baby girl that we named Lilith. Peter's family was very upset when they heard the name. If you didn't know, Lilith means ghost or of the night. We didn't pick this name because of its meaning, but because it is a name that every girl in my family has had for many years. My middle name is Lilith, along with my mom's, my grandma's, and even my great-grandma's. For a while, I didn't visit my in-laws. I didn't want to hear them talk about how I shouldn't have named my daughter Lilith. But yesterday we saw them again. It was my mother-in-law's birthday. As soon as we showed up, things started to go badly. Everybody wanted to hold Lilith, which made my mother-in-law upset because people weren't paying attention to her and made me overwhelmed. I didn't want people holding her. I was going through a pretty bad postpartum depression, and it was still pretty early to see people. I let people look at her but declined when anyone asked to hold her. During dinner, I heard my sister-in-law talking to my mother-in-law in German. I heard her complaining about how she couldn't hold my baby. My sister-in-law even had the audacity to call me, and I quote, a fat, ugly hockey addict. I turned to my sister-in-law and mother-in-law and told them off in German. I basically said that I have always known what they have said about me, but calling me names was the last straw. I also mentioned how I have known German for almost my whole life. The table instantly blew up. People were yelling at me because apparently this was all my fault. I left with Peter and we haven't talked to them since. So am I the idiot?
Wow, it sounds like navigating family dynamics can be incredibly challenging, especially when it comes to personal choices and feelings about names. The tension of wanting to respect beliefs while also asserting oneself can lead to some heated moments. It's a fine line to tread when dealing with expectations from family, especially in such sensitive situations. Speaking of navigating personal preferences, let's shift gears a bit. Imagine being in a similar family predicament where everyone has their own ideas about names and identity, but this time, the focus is on the motivations behind those decisions. It's a reminder that sometimes what's in a name can spark unexpected emotions, and the conversations can take turns we never saw coming. Shall we dive into the next story?
My brother, 30 years old male, is married to Haley, 29 years old female, and they're expecting a baby together. Last year, I, 17 years old female, officially changed my first name from Evelyn to Indy, which was a nickname form of my original middle name. My parents gave in after realizing how serious I was about being Indy and how I was not warming up to or growing into Evelyn. My brother and Haley want an older vintage name for their baby, and Haley asked me about 5 months ago why I disliked Evelyn enough to change the name. At the time, she brought up how popular the name has become and how vintage is back. I told her I didn't like vintage names, and to me, it sounded really old-fashioned. I told her the popularity didn't influence my decision. She wanted to know my reason for disliking older names and why I liked something like Indy instead. I didn't mind her asking this the first time. She brought it up again a week later, and she asked the same question and pressed more for why. She asked a third and a fourth time. I gave her the same answer and asked her why she kept asking me. I told her my answer wasn't going to change. By the 7th time she asked, she admitted she was worried her baby would hate having an older name and wanted to figure out what she could do to prevent what happened with me happening to her. She also said she'd like me to rethink my name because she thought Evelyn was beautiful, and she was sad I had chosen something like Indy over it. I asked her to stop so many times already, and I even asked my brother to stop her. He told me I needed to understand it was the hormones. I can easily say she has asked me this more than 25 times by now. I'm not exaggerating that number either. 2 weeks ago, when she brought it up again, she felt like I had made a mistake changing my name and how 30-year-old me wouldn't be so against Evelyn. I told her 30-year-old me can deal with it if that happens. She told me I didn't really have a good reason to like the name, and Indy seemed like the kind of name someone young likes, but not someone older. Then yesterday happened, and I kind of lost my temper. She started out asking the same stuff, and the baby is almost ready to be born, so I know it's coming to an end. But she asked me to really think about why and help her, because she couldn't figure out what she'd do differently than my parents did. Then she said, they really shouldn't have let me change my name so young. I snapped, and I told her to stop asking me the same question because my answer won't change. And her comments are not changing my mind because I don't like old-fashioned names. I told her I think they're awful, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about how much better they are and having her try to make me find a reason she finds acceptable. I told her just like she hates Indy, I hate Evelyn and she needs to let it go already. She burst into tears and my brother got so mad at me. My parents were also like, why did I have to speak to her so harshly? Am I the asshole?
Wow, it sounds like this situation really escalated quickly. We witnessed the tough dynamics of family relationships where personal choices and insecurities can collide. It's intriguing to see how one person's journey with their name can trigger deep emotions and fears in another, especially when it comes to parenting decisions. Shifting gears, let's dive into another scenario that delves into the often complicated world of friendships and financial expectations. This next story challenges the notion of fairness in social settings and raises the question of whether it's acceptable to prioritize personal boundaries over group dynamics. Curious to see how this unfolds? Let's get into it. I am a 27-year-old male and have been a part of a small friend group, around 8 people total, basically since college. For some background, 2 people from the group, Susan and Greg, are just absolute leeches. Going out for lunch, expect them to order the most expensive on the menu, then feed you some sob story about their finances, and then dump half the bill on you. Last weekend, Dan, one of the people from the group, told me about a casual dinner. I told him how if Susan or Greg were there, I wouldn't be able to come. He tells me that they would be there, but I should just put my opinions aside and come just once. This is kind of where I might be an annoying person. I agreed with him and told him I would be there. I show up, and we all get to talking. Everyone began putting in their orders. Most of them spent about $40. There were only about 6 people there. When it got to Susan and Greg, they both ordered expensive dishes, around $200. When it was my turn to order, everyone looked at me, but I just picked up the menu and pointed to the $4 Miller Lite and sent the waiter away. Dan asked why I hadn't ordered anything, and all I said was that I lost my appetite. The other 2 friends got up as well to cancel their orders and just have drinks. After the main courses came out, I saw Susan and Greg picking at their food. The waiter then brings over the check. Greg then grabs the waiter and asks him to split the check 6 ways. I stand up and correct him, saying the check was to be split 3 ways. Greg looks at me confused and asks why, since we always split the bill. I reminded him that 3 of us had not eaten any food, so we would just be paying for our drinks. So basically, at the end of the night, Dan, who probably only ate around $50 worth of food, was stuck with a $146.98 check at the end. Yes, I remember the exact number. I swear I saw his jaw drop when he picked that receipt up. I slid a $10 bill towards the check, said goodbye everyone, and walked out. The next morning, I found my phone full of texts from Greg and Susan telling me I was a jerk for not ordering any food and forcing them to pay more than they had accounted for. I honestly laughed because the stakes alone were more than what they had paid, but to each their own, right? I also got a lot of messages from Dan saying that I could have just not come instead of pulling that stunt and getting him stuck with an outrageous bill. At this restaurant, the bar is separate, so drinks are on a separate bill. 90% of restaurants where I live do not do separate checks and might separate the bill for you if you are lucky. Dan could have easily asked Greg and Susan to transfer him the money if he wanted, but he's always been about helping them through their financial hardship, even though they're just using him and keep dragging me into it. I admit what I did was immature, but I'm tired of being forced to play along. It's his money, and if he wants to spend it on them, that's fine, but I'm not paying for them. 3. Also, Dan's a really good friend of mine, albeit blind as a bat. I was just trying to get him to see what kind of people he was helping. I will admit it was a tad bit petty. Before I talk about today's posts, please consider subscribing. Wow, these stories were a roller coaster. The first post about the OP finally standing up to her judgmental in-laws was intense. Imagine keeping a language secret to avoid their mean comments. And the second tale with the Sile and name drama had me cringing at the constant probing. It's like she just wouldn't take the hint. Lastly, the friend group dinner ended with quite the twist. Kudos to the OP for not letting the leeches take advantage any longer. What do you all think? Were those people really AHs or just testing the waters? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voiced. If you enjoyed daily high-quality stories, please like and subscribe to show your support.